introductions. I will begin by just kind of announcing a name and have them go through their quick introduction, and then we'll go from there. So Paul, would you like to start?
Sure, I'm Paul Shanowski. I'm the director of the Environmental Design Program, and I'll be talking to you in just a minute.
Perfect. Peggy?
Hi, I'm Peggy Gordon. I'm the Assistant Program Director. I work alongside with Paul to make sure that we run this place smooth for you guys and your students.
Awesome. Aaliyah?
Hello, everyone. I'm Aaliyah Richmond-Akins. I'm the Director of Advising and Student Success, and I'm really excited that you all could be here today.
Fernando?
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. Hi, everyone. I'm Fernando Martinez. I'm the Recruitment and Advising Coordinator. So it's very likely that I've met a lot of you at recruitment events, ENVD student for days, etc. And I'm also a first and second year advisor along with Dylan. It's very likely that some of your students, I'm their advisor. So nice to meet everyone. And like Dylan said, I'll be coordinating some of the questions later on.
And last but not least, Laura.
Hey everyone, Laura Arroyo. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Director for Housing Administration. Just a little bit about my position. I oversee both on-campus housing as well as off-campus housing. So for any of you that might be commuters, I can also work to support you today.
Wonderful. So I'm going to ask all of us to turn off our video except for Paul so we can give him the floor on that. And then we will move forward with conversation with Paul and environmental design for fall 2020.
All right, thanks, Dylan. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us. We're really excited to have everyone joining us this year. We've got a really strong class. This was the largest number of applicants that we've had in the last over 10 years, with the highest actual numbers of qualifications. So we're really excited of how we've mixed it. We've got a little over 50% of our students are out of state, and about roughly 55% female coming in. So it's a very balanced class. And what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes to talk about answering some general questions that probably everyone has. What is fall going to be like in the middle of everything that's going on? And I will try and answer this as best I can based on what we know today. And we're 2.5 weeks out from starting. I think we're in pretty good shape. ENVD's actually had a fall planning team that's been together since March, that we have been planning how we're going to set this out, how we're going to make the best experience for every student there is. So let me just walk through a couple of things, big questions, and then you'll be able to ask specific questions as we go along. One of the questions that everybody seems to be asking is, well, are we going to have in-person classes? So let me tackle that head on as the first large question. As you've probably been reading, every class on campus, every room on campus has reduced capacity in it. Roughly, the rooms have about 25% capacity in them. What does that mean? It means that we cannot have full classes at one time. We have to break classes up into sections. So for studios, it means that we can handle about half a class at a given time. What that means is we've worked really hard to think about what would be the most beneficial experience for each person given the limitations that we have. The classes will be the first year experience, and these are what we call coordinated studios. Everyone in first year is learning the same thing. They're just broken up into groups of 20 students each. There's about 8 sections for our incoming class this year. All of them are working on the same project. They will be doing 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday in studio. Each of those days will look a little bit different. Mondays will tend to be assignment introduction days. And on those days, they will typically either be working half the class, 10 students at a time, for about 45 minutes or an hour getting their updates either in the building. They might be outside if the weather's nice. One of the things that the public health experts have told us, that in nice weather, we should try and be outside as much as possible. Luckily in Boulder, we get nice weather all the way to the end of October. So we are going to take advantage of that. So Mondays will be a lot of project introduction type days. Wednesdays will typically be one-on-one days between the faculty and the student, or the TA and the student, or small groups. These will primarily be online, remote through Zoom. And the reason for that is our public health requirements say that we have to stay at least 6 to 8 feet separate, social distance. So it's pretty hard to stand next to somebody and make notes on their drawings when we're 6 to 8 feet away. So that will primarily be remote, one-on-one, as I said, or small groups. We have really worked a lot on this during the spring. We're brought in a lot of technology. We're still testing all the time. It seems to work really well. The students who went through it in the spring said this was very effective. Fridays will typically be an activity day, and so that will either be learning to use tools in the creative labs, doing 3D printing, or it'll be sketching where we're working in groups somewhere on campus. It might be a site visit in town. So each day is going to be a little bit differently. We are going to evaluate situations each week. The idea is to maximize our connection and our contact, while also making sure everybody is safe. So that's the way Studio is going to work. The other classes that everyone's going to take, they're going to be taking what we call a technique or a technology class. That class will be done in small groups, predominantly with teaching assistants, with a large lecture from the faculty member. Those will be hands-on, so that'll have a lot of opportunity for really learning technique. The third class they'll do is our Intro to Environmental Design. That's a large class. They'll be doing that primarily remote, just like all other large classes on campus, but we will have in-person days where they will be doing some site visits and walking around campus. Those are the core classes that everyone will have. They will also have one other class, such as writing or another general ed class that they need. Depending on the size of that class will depend on how they are working. So that's in general. I want to show you real quick, without taking a lot of time. I'm going to share my screen here. We're all becoming quite the experts on Zoom. There we go. So this is a model of what environmental design will look like, the experiences that they have. And I encourage everybody to go onto our website. This is directly on the Colorado EDU ENVD website. And what I wanted to show was these two slides. So here you can see the studio setup. So what the difference between now and what it was before is, again, you can see half capacity, but they will have access to those studios. The other thing I want to show you is this is on the left. This is the TV studios, the Zoom studios that we're setting up for large lectures. It will allow faculty plus their TAs to have a complete lecture area, and they'll be live with the students, being able to give a lecture just like normal, answering questions. As much as we can make it, it'll feel like normal without actually being in the classroom. And then last thing I wanted to show, this is just a map of our building. And I wanted to highlight this because a lot of questions are on how are students going to be able to connect outside of class. We've created what we call both flex spaces in the class. And these are these light reddish colored spaces. Students will be able to use those 7 days a week, really 24 hours a day. They have their card access, and they'll be able to use those in small groups to collaborate. socially distanced, they'll be cleaned, and those are their spaces. So we thought a lot about how we maximize our space while also keeping everybody safe. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that. Bottom line, we are doing everything that we can to balance how to give a great community as well as keep everyone safe. I've spent a lot of time with our associate directors and our staff. We've looked at everything from how we're going to check out materials to how we're going to teach. I also have a student in the program, so I have a lot of personal interest in this, how this is going to work. I feel like we are prepared. We are definitely open to whatever questions that people may have, but know that all of us are working together to make this the absolute best experience that everyone can have. So Dylan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. We appreciate that conversation. I'm going to pass it over to Laura to start talking about our housing experience. Laura, so if you want to jump on, I will give you the floor, and then we will move to the Q&A section here in just a few minutes.
Absolutely. Again, Laura Arroyo, pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm so excited to meet with you all today, although I will definitely say that this is such an odd situation. We're on Zoom, we're not in person, but we're trying to make the very best of a pretty difficult situation. And I just want to name that because I know that for many of you that are on this call, there's been so many changes that have happened in your life in such a small amount of time. And this is the first time any of us have been through a pandemic. So I will just say personally that I really appreciate everyone's flexibility and the calls that I've received. I've talked to probably some of you on this call, myself, and then I know that our staff and folks in housing have spoken with many of you. And everyone has just been super patient and super understanding as we've navigated the impacts of COVID-19 and going through a pandemic together for the first time. So again, Laura Arroyo, I'm the Director for Housing Administration. My area is overseeing housing administration, which is really the housing operations, as well as off-campus housing and neighborhood relations. So my area, a couple of things I like to explain for students. Housing administration is thinking about students before they arrive to campus. So when you're calling housing administration or occupancy management, you're speaking to everyone that's making decisions about housing and placement within housing. And then once students arrive, we have something called residence life. And residence life is all of the RAs, it's the living experience, it's the staff that live and work within the residence halls that support and provide support to families and students once they're here. So we work in tandem. We're the same office. I actually worked in residence life for 3 years here at CU before transitioning into this new role. And before that, I worked in residence life for over 15 years. So if you have questions as we get into the Q&A about anything regarding residence life or the community that you're joining, I can help answer that too. What I like to do is provide a little bit of background about how we got here. Many of you, I think, have probably read the Roadmap to Fall 2020, but I like to give a little bit of overview just for a description to make sure we're all on the same page. So for Roadmap to Fall 2020, decisions were made by the university right at the start of June to make a safer and healthier campus to support for COVID-19 safety for the fall. And that process was challenging because in so many ways we were creating a different housing model before that. And for many of you, you'll understand phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Those are the ways that we kind of talked about housing before, and it was dependent upon when you applied for housing. After Roadmap to Fall 2020, we changed the way that we were housing students, and that was to provide a safer experience. What the big change that we made is that we are assigning students now based on their college. So all of the ENVD students that are living on campus for the fall are all going to be living together. And that's really exciting for me as a college administrator. I come from a campus and a background where we work really closely with faculty. Many of you might remember the RAP model, the Residential Academic Programs. You might have signed up for that previously. and looked forward to that for the fall. And what we're doing now for the first time ever is providing really a wrap experience to every single student on campus. And the reason why that matters so much right now, more than ever, is that for the fall, what we can do is by coordinating with our academic partners, like we're doing today, by having a joint town hall, what we do is we provide housing in conjunction with the college. That allows for smaller cohorts. It allows for more specific housing. It allows for students to connect with their academic experience as well as their residential experience. We've worked hand in hand with our epidemiologist on campus to provide this experience. And I really appreciate how he explains it. He talks about it like a deck of cards. So the way that he talks about this is that we can have the deck of cards as large as we want it, but it's how we shuffle the deck that matters. So by providing students in ENVD a living experience where they're all together, then when they are going to class and when they're engaging and intermingling in the classroom setting, they're returning to their residence hall and intermingling again with each other. That's really important so that we can limit intermingling to just the college. So all of the ENVD students for the fall that are living on campus will be in Willard Hall. And that's really exciting. It's a great location. For those of you that have seen the Boulder campus, been on the Boulder campus, you know that Willard, it's right next to Cheyenne Arapahoe, it's right on Farron Field. It's a pretty fantastic location and close to where your classes may be. And that's really supporting your experience when you arrive in the fall. The other thing that I want to say, because some of you may be choosing to live at home, you may be choosing to live within the Boulder community. What's important is that you know that as much as possible, we're also working in partnership with the college to provide a really quality experience no matter where you're living. Whether you're living on campus or whether you're choosing to live at home for your own safety or for your family's safety, it is so critical that you know that you're part of our community. And we're working to provide an experience, even if it's virtual, and that's for your safety, that virtual experience, that remote experience is still connected and still positive. So for any of the students that are living off campus, we have something called our Commuter Bus Program. And the Commuter Bus Program provides a cohorting model very similarly to what we're doing in the residence hall. We'll be dividing students by their college and making and helping to make connections with and for you. So we'll have almost like a virtual RA, which is similar to what our RAs will do within the residence hall, but we'll do that for our off-campus students as well. So the only thing that I will say, I really care about COVID-19 safety. Of course, we have to. This is the first time we've been through a pandemic, and so in many ways, we're building this ship together as we're sailing it. But I also want to say that there's many ways that we care about your safety. And that's not just about COVID-19. It's also about how we provide a quality experience for you when you are at the CU Boulder campus so that you don't feel alone and you don't feel isolated. The cohorting model that we've done for the fall, I truly believe helps to get at some of that. It helps connect students within the residential experience in a smaller setting so that you are together in an experience within your academic college together and within your living experience together. And that's really critical for some of that social isolation that I think families and students are worried about in joining a college for the fall, especially a college as large as CU Boulder. So just know that we're thinking a lot about that. We're thinking about our in-person opportunities and our virtual opportunities and building a model that allows for both. It allows flexibility for students that really prefer to remain virtual, and it allows for in-person experiences as well that promote safety, PPE usage, and social distancing requirements, but still that we can be together in it. So I know that there's lots of questions on the call. What I want to say is that first, you know me, my name's Laura, and after this, I expect that I'll get lots of emails. I always do, and that's okay. That's what we want and what we hope. We want to provide an experience where you know a face and a name, and it's not just a face and a name on a website, but it's somebody that you can speak with and come to if you have questions. And that's for students and for families. So just know that we're here for you, and I expect that. I'm going to kind of end here so we can answer some of the Q&A. I will say that I have a lot of knowledge about COVID-19 testing, about what opening will look like, what welcome week will look like, as well as what you can expect for the fall. So any of those questions I'm happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. I'm starting to see a few conversations come through. I want to take a look at the bottom of your screen. We do have a chat feature. We are trying to help some people through some technology issues. So if we can move any of those questions that you have to the Q&A box, which is just farther down on that panel at the bottom there to allow you to bring in some questions. We have a few individuals that are going to be monitoring those questions and bringing those in. I also want to acknowledge that there's a larger group here to help with those questions in those conversations. So Laura and Paul, as some questions are coming through, if you need some other specific conversations that you would like to bring up from the rest of the group here, feel free to call on anybody and we can jump in too. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Fernando. And we'll begin that kind of monitored dialogue. And I've moved it back to the gallery screen here so we can see dialogue amongst everybody here. And then we will go forward with questions for the remaining half hour of this call today. So thank you, Laura and Paul, for both being here. I'm starting to see questions come in, so we will start putting those together. And Fernando will start with our first question.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dylan. So I'll get started with one of the first questions that was posted here, and I can probably answer this one. It's an advising question. So the question is there help available to get the general ed writing class? They have been full. So in response to that, I would encourage the student to reach out to either Dylan or myself. We're both advisors, and between us, we're advising all the incoming students. And so specifically with writing, no new spots are currently being offered for that class. So once your student reaches out to us, we'll work together to find a class in its place. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. Yeah, so moving on, this next question is kind of a combination question for both Paul and Laura. So it's about campus safety. So what happens if the college has an outbreak and the student is stuck in their dorm with online courses? Are there any contingency plans? Is tuition/room board the same cost even though they are returning in Thanksgiving?
Wow, that covers a lot of things. I'll hit the ones that are my area, and I'll let Laura hit on housing things. I think it's really important that everyone walk into this with assuming that there is going to be positive cases. I mean, let's think about this. We basically have a small city. We have 30,000 students, 5,000 faculty and staff. This is a small city. So everyone needs to be going into this with the knowledge that there will be positive cases on campus. So let's not try and sugarcoat that. The question is, what's going to happen when that happens? From our perspective, from the classroom perspective, we will get notified if any student comes up positive. We will then take action that is appropriate based on what the advice is and what type of class it is. We have a group that's putting our own policy for our building. We have some unique things in environmental design because of our studio. We don't have lots of individual classes. We have lots of big spaces. So we have to be a little more careful with those big spaces on how we handle that. So we do have plans. The plans are specific to really each class. In some cases, we will be moving a whole class online for a week or so as required. There may be times, depending on what campus does, this is public health, where they'll be doing contact tracing and everyone in a class must be quarantined. That will all be under the control of campus public health. But from our perspective, as soon as we get notified, usually a day, that'll happen within 24 hours, we'll go into our protocol depending on where that exposure happened and what type of class it is.
I can answer from the residence life and housing side. So we have quite a bit of space set aside for both social isolation as well as quarantine. And both of those things matter, and they're a little bit different. So I'll speak to both of them. There's times when a student may feel that they've come in contact with COVID, but they don't know if they have COVID. And that's a time when we need students to stay apart because we're waiting to see for test results, or we're helping with contact tracing. Then there's times when students are actually a confirmed case. We have space set aside for both of those because the time is different, or the parameters are different of what we need to do to provide a safe space for those students. So that's on campus, as well as we have other spaces available to support some of our off-campus students as well. So that's something that we've worked really closely with our Wurtemberg Health Clinic on, and we have a full protocol to support our students that are on campus to make sure that they are in a safe space should they come in contact with COVID. What I think is important to note is that sometimes I think students are thinking that we're doing this for the first time. We're actually not. We've stayed open. Housing has been open all spring and all summer long. So we've had students on campus that entire time, and we've had to activate on our protocol many times throughout that. I really echo the dean's comments around we should not go into the fall expecting that we won't have a case. We should, in fact, go into the fall expecting that COVID is present in our community, because of course it will be. And so what we do to manage our safety for our students in that respect matters. We should think about it from the moment that a student is coming on campus, which we are. And then the other thing I think was in that question of what do we do, what would be the times that the university would shut down or close. We don't actually expect that we're going to be closing as we did in the spring. And I want to say that very clearly because I think we've learned so much from the time that we first heard about COVID. It first came into our country. We were first making an understanding of what that means for us. What I do think would happen, there's a couple of reasons why CU may choose to close. I think that if the governor, the state, or the national government were to make a call, those were the reasons why we might close housing. We could likely go online with classes, but still continue to have housing available because that's what we did in the spring and continued into the summer. And I would expect that that would be likely. So just know that when we're thinking about housing, we're thinking about housing for the entire semester. And then the other part of that question was, is there a cost difference for the semester because we're closing at November? And no, it's the same cost. The reason why we're closing at November is to provide the longest time possible before the rush of the winter season to make sure that we're breaking so that students can return safely to their home.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura and Paul, for those answers. Moving a little bit back to environmental design, Paul, can you talk a little bit more about how many freshmen or how many students are going to be in the classes, and also how many incoming students are coming into ENVD this fall?
Yeah, so we have essentially two different types of classes. So we have overall, let me answer that first. So we have about 160 students coming in this semester. That breaks down to about 125 roughly of incoming new freshmen, and then the rest are split between transfers coming from other universities and students transferring in from other programs on campus. And of the roughly 125, again, we split that about 55% are in-state and about 45% out of state, roughly. Now, how are they split up in classes? So studio and technology classes are 20 students each. So we have about 8 sections of that spread between half the people are taking those in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, technology Tuesday, Thursday, and half of them are taking it in the afternoon. The larger class, their Intro to Environmental Design, that's a class that everybody takes. It's our large lecture. Everybody takes it, but we do have TAs that answer individuals. So about 20 students is typically their real cohort that they will get to know and they will work with most often.
Absolutely. Then kind of going off of that, how many or will students be required to wear masks in class? And I would just like to add to that too, that campus is providing 2 approved PPE masks for each student. But Paul, can you talk a little bit more about, will they have to wear those masks in class?
Yes, that's actually a campus requirement. So students will be wearing masks across campus, and they will be wearing them in class. They will also be, as I was talking about earlier, social distance. So all of our in studios, they'll be 8 feet apart, and the classrooms, depends on the classroom, anywhere from 6 feet, could be more depending on the ventilation, but they will be wearing masks, and the instructors will be wearing masks at all times.
Yeah, Paul. And then if CU happens to close in person, how will classes change from that point moving forward? And if those classes are online, how will the students get the materials to work on their studio projects?
Okay, great question. So this is something we have spent a lot of time really focusing on. Since we knew early on that at Thanksgiving everything will go online, we have started with the premise of we are building every class with the best online experience. We, of course, for years know how to do this in person, but we didn't want to make the online any less of experience. So all classes, if the university has to do online, or if there's a week when we have to be online, or whatever the circumstance, all the projects have been set up so they work perfectly fine online. The students will be having one-on-ones with the instructor online or in small groups. All the assignments have been built from the start where they can be done remotely, and when they have the requirement to use 3D printing, or if they're using our laser cutters, all of that is being set up so students can send files and do the assignments that way. So there will be no real break in terms of assignments. Everything's been set up so that they can do them remotely or in person. It should be pretty seamless going from one mode to another.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. This next question, I'm going to direct it over to Aaliyah as the Director of Advising. Aaliyah, so what is the best way to reach advisors? Students could not find available times before he registered, and he also didn't see an email link.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So basically, the best way to get a hold of your academic advisor is through your student Buff portal advising. And I was thinking it might be helpful just to share my screen. I know a lot of students are familiar with this setup, but let's see. It might be helpful for some families to also see this platform. Well, sorry, I think I chose the wrong one. One second. Well, it's basically where you can see your advisor's calendar and your student success team. Here in this corner up here, you can type in, for example, Dylan West, and you can check his available times. So this last week we had drop-ins on Monday and Tuesday, and then for the following weeks we'll be having appointments. Let's check Fernando's. And Fernando's calendar can be seen here too. So this is where you typically see some available time slots. And if you're not able to sign up for an appointment through Buff Portal Advising, it's best just to email your advisor. And even if your enrollment window has passed, August 3rd, basically all of the class registration open for all students. And so advisors can help you to make sure you can finalize your schedule. So if you need any advice on what classes to take, you can just email fernando.martinez@colorado.edu or dylan.west@colorado.edu, or use your Buff Portal Advising to set up an appointment.
Can I add one more element to that too, Fernando? I just want to also echo too, every Friday we typically update for the following week. Over the summers, it gets to be quite chaotic and we're going through quite a bit of email to be able to navigate that. So as Aaliyah showed, you know, there's calendars where you'll start seeing appointments in different boxes where you can sign in. So in the following week, every Friday is a really great way to look for when our next upcoming weeks of appointments are, so you can get an opportunity to chat with the student. We've been hosting drop-ins every week for the last couple of weeks, so it's been opportunities to engage with us, and we will be moving back to an appointment model starting on Monday. So there is a lot of opportunities to come there, but I just don't want you all to be frightened that you just saw a blank calendar there. It's because we're just in the middle of transitioning from drop-ins back to appointments. So you will see that tomorrow for the following week.
Absolutely. Thank you for that insight. So kind of moving back over to housing, Laura, we have a question for you. So we'd like to know about the bathroom situation and cleaning supplies needed. I'm assuming also for the residence halls.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are lowering density across all of our residence halls. We've actually, this is an interesting year. We have the largest incoming class that we've ever had at CU. It was impressive to try to house everyone and do it in the midst of COVID. But what I can tell you is that we've done it really intentionally. We've lowered density to make sure that we have less students within the residence halls, which is really important for COVID safety. And it also helps with our student to fixture ratio. So you'll hear some schools talk about in recommendations, the student to fixture, which means bathroom fixture. One thing that CU has done that I really appreciate, some schools have chosen to kind of close off or require stalls to be closed for every other stall, for example, as well as every other sink. And something that CU has done is decided not to do that. And the reason we're not doing that is A, we're trusting that our students are going to be social distancing wherever they can, but also we don't want to stop students from doing the safety things that they need to do to wash their hands. So what we believe and what we're concerned about is that if we were to limit certain things within the bathroom, it would actually prevent students from doing the safety measures that they need to do to wash their hands and be safe. So for some of the cleaning things, we're increasing cleaning on all high touch surfaces. So I know that the question is specifically about bathrooms, but it's just as important that we're thinking about door handles. We're thinking about open spaces that students may be walking through or staying within. So community spaces, lounge spaces, all of those things also could increase the spread of COVID if we're not cleaning them. So we're doing all of those things as well. And then for cleaning supplies, our plan is to have cleaning supplies for students so that you can support us in this measure as well. If you have cleaning supplies that you trust and you want to bring, if you suddenly can get all the hand sanitizer that I think is so challenging for all of us to find right now, please bring your hand sanitizer with you. I think that's really important for you to take responsibility for your community as well. But just know that there's not an expectation that you do that. We're going to be providing that.
Great, thank you, Laura. And then kind of continuing that conversation, we kind of have a few questions for housing here. So a student did not get into Willard, and so they were told that this would not change. Should they reach out to you directly, Laura, if the student is in ENVD?
Yeah, if they could reach out to me just so I can dig into it a little bit to understand what's going on, you can just send me an email after this. I'm the only Laura Arroyo, and it's literally my first name dot last name at colorado.edu. Just email me so I can check into it. Sometimes we had students that changed their major later, and that could be the case. Maybe that you changed into a different college, so you were kind of locked into your housing previously. So let me look into it a little bit. With ENVD, because it's a smaller college, we're really trying to get all of our ENVD students together.
Excellent. And so, Laura, if a student doesn't have a roommate assignment yet, do you know if that's going to change for them in the upcoming days?
I just was talking up to a mom about this today. So any other year, I think I could tell you for sure that you're getting a roommate, because usually we open at about 102% occupancy. We usually have students in overcapacity at this point. Because we're working to lower density, we've actually contracted with hotels as well in the local area to support our students. So some students will be housed in hotels, mostly students that are currently on the wait list. But ENVD, we're really trying to support within Willard as much as possible. I say that because for some of you, you may not have a roommate now, and I can't guarantee that you'll get one initially when we arrive to campus. And we're working on it right now. We're finalizing assignments, but we're really trying not to make any more changes if we can. Room assignments went out on Monday with roommate information in it. So right now I would say you don't have a roommate. Our hope actually is if some of the numbers decrease, if we can spread students out a little bit, we're actually trying to do that because it allows for more and better social distancing. We would work with you to do that, so we're not going to be moving you again. But if we have space available in the fall, we may be talking to students and saying, are you interested in a single? Because we're trying to fill those spaces to make sure we're supporting for social distancing.
Yeah, excellent, Laura. And so Laura, with these students being on campus and in the residence halls, do you know how residence life or housing or maybe campus will try to minimize the intermingling of these students visiting each other, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So residence life is working with student conduct on a number of policies. So there's going to be policies within the student handbook that are being updated specifically for COVID-19. One of those is actually around the guest policy. They're being pretty stringent with the guest policy. Usually if you're a student, you could go into another building, you can access that other building. We're really trying to maintain guest policy within the building only. So that means if there was an outside guest, they would not be able to come into the building to visit you. And that's really to make sure that we know who's in our buildings at all time to limit the intermingling that can occur. In addition, as I had discussed before, the way that we've coordinated with our colleges is to support that limiting of intermingling. So the same people you're living with are the same people that you're going to class with, which is really helpful, specifically for contact tracing on the back end. We know who to contact because we know who you've come in contact with. Now, ultimately, I can't control students. And so I kind of ask, and I really look to each of you to really take responsibility for yourself to continue to social distance. That's really important. What I'm seeing in 18-year-olds and what we know from our epidemiologist is that a lot of students, COVID isn't necessarily showing up in students in the same way that it might show up in me. So your responsibility to keep the campus safe isn't just for yourself, it's also for all of the staff, all of the faculty, all of the cleaning crews that have worked so hard to make this possible. So I believe that we can stay open if we work together as a community, but that means that we all need to work together and continue to socially distance. And what I will say, interactions outside of your residence hall, it's a beautiful campus. It is a beautiful community. We're going to continue to support you in all of the outdoor activities that you choose and come to the Boulder community to participate in. And the wonderful thing about Boulder and Colorado is that those things, while you can socially distance, you can still engage in those activities, which is really great.
I completely agree with Laura. I think definitely explore the great outdoors in Boulder. So in addition to that, do you know, Laura, what does the library kind of situation look like? So if students want to leave their dorm, can they go study at the library? Can they go to the rec center, or can they go to the student center? Some of those places?
Absolutely. So what we're doing, we of course have to make it look a little bit different for COVID-19. One of the most important things is that we know who our students are that have accessed the building, and that's for contact tracing. So what you'll see is that we'll lower the number of students that can be in a space, just like in classes, right? So instead of having a 100-person class, that will be lowered down so that we know the students and we can support social distancing. So what that will mean is that for something like the rec center is going to be open. It'll just be less students at the same time in the rec center, because as you can imagine, if someone is working out next to you, you know, you may be sweating, and that creates a potentially unsafe experience for you and for the other students. So we want to create enough space. So any student that enters a building will be keeping a good record through your Buff One card to know that you've accessed the space, so that on the back end, if we needed to reach out to you, we could. For the library, it'll absolutely be open. All of our student centers, as well as the C4C, our Center for Community, that's also going to be open.
That's good to hear, Laura. Thank you. So jumping back over to Paul. Paul and environmental design. Paul, what supplies do students need to purchase before the first day of classes besides a laptop? And do they need a laptop? What brands, what sizes, maybe talk about toolboxes, etc.
Sure, great questions. And I do want some of this, so you don't have to quickly write this down. We do have on our website, it has a list of, has our computer recommendations and our supply list. Let me say that definitely having a computer is, you should have that when you get here. The reason is more and more stuff now is being done on digitally. We use the Adobe Creative Suite extensively. If you're looking to buy that though, wait until your student is actually here on campus, because they can get it through the bookstore at a discount for $95. So do that. Dylan just posted our list of supplies and technology recommendations. You can use, one of the common questions is, should I get a Mac or should I have a PC? You can use either. If you're going, the only thing that I would say is, if you're using a Mac, you might want to go ahead and set it up so it's partitioned with something like Boot Camp, because there is some software that they will be using in the second semester that runs much better on the PC side than a Mac side. But you can get either platform, get something that's going to last you. This is definitely an investment to make. In terms of regular supplies, things that they're going to need at the beginning. Sketchbook is important, sketch paper, rolls of sketch paper, pencils, and pens. Those are so things that you can use to do your drawing. That's the most important thing to start off with. A toolbox, get something that's not too bulky, something that's pretty easy to walk around with. Remember, they have to carry it from their dorm or on the bus or from their house. You don't need a giant toolbox that looks like a tackle box that you're ready to go fishing for a week, right? That's not what they need. Something that's just big enough to hold sketch paper and their pens and pencils. That is fine. That's all you really need to start with. Your individual instructors will then, as you go along, some of the things they'll add in, they'll add T-square for drafting. They might add some triangles for doing that, but you don't have to get that ahead of time. You can wait. You can make full use of online ordering to get that just in time, but make sure you have a sketchbook, rolls of sketch paper, some pencils and pens, and you're going to be ready to go. Have your computer set. You'll be all set.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. Great advice and recommendations. This next question, since Welcome Week is just around the corner, I'll probably call on Dylan also, since he's been coordinating, and Paul as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Welcome Week will look like for the students, and will environmental design offer an in-person or virtual event to connect with the students prior to classes starting?
Dylan, I'll let you lead on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we are planning to do an in-person orientation experience for everyone that will be living on campus. We've been working really hard to make sure that we meet the public health safety standards for all of our students. So All of our students that are in our program, whether they're living on campus or off campus, have been designated an orientation group that is no larger than 9 students, and they will be receiving an email next week from New Student Family Programs and Environmental Design announcing who their orientation group is, as well as where their designated group will be meeting. Most of our students that are living on campus are going to meet just west of Willard Hall, and we have a map designating all those different locations for you. And then for our commuter students, we have some designated areas outside of the ENVD building. We've been putting together a series of different information gatherings and community building exercises that we can do throughout campus in a very safe way. And that will be a bulk of our experience. A big part of that as well is going to go into the environmental design building specifically, and understanding how to utilize all the resources, different flex spaces that Paul talked about at the beginning, how they can access those, reserve those different technology or other resources that are being provided to all of our students, and ensure that you have full access to the building and know where to navigate the various working spaces. The other piece to this, to ensure that all students are able to have access to the same information, is we will do the morning part in person. The afternoon will go remote. We will do a full live, full hour conversation with our students. We'll do a faculty, student, staff panel where we'll talk about the first year experience in full, navigate some of those common questions about what our first day is going to look like, different things to navigate on that in terms of how we can ensure that everyone has access to that same level of information. So we'll be doing a 2-part component there to ensure that everyone has access to that information, while still providing that in-depth in-person experience. One thing our students pride themselves on is the community that is environmental design, and we never want that part to be missing in our student experience coming in. So we have provided a way to ensure that students will get that. They'll get 2 reminders. One will come next week and one will come that Friday right before the event. This will happen Saturday, August 22nd. And so your students should be receiving some emails through their Colorado email account addressing that event in full. Fernando, was there a second part to that question, or did I get all of it?
Yeah, I think you got all of it. It was essentially what we're planning to do to connect with the students for welcome.
Perfect. Well, I definitely gave a long-winded answer, but I hope that just shows that we have a lot planned for your students. And despite everything that's going on, we do think that we are going to be able to provide a really strong experience to your student for the fall semester through starting with the orientation experience. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. I always rather have more information than not enough. So thanks for that.
Agreed.
I do want to acknowledge that it's 4:58, but we're so close to getting to most of the questions. So we are planning to go until 5:05. So if you do have to log out, we are recording this. So we will post this on our website later on next week. So if you do have to log out at 5, that is okay. You can follow up later with us to see the full video. But jumping back over to Paul about environmental design, Paul, can you talk a little bit about the typical graduation rates for environmental design for our program? How many graduates in the program, and how many changed their major?
Yeah, those are great questions. So we just this year, so this last year we had, it was about 130 graduates this last year. We typically will have about 20 students or so that will, 20 to 30 students that will change their major out of a class of about 160. So figure it's somewhere around 10 to 15%, somewhere in there is typical, which is pretty typical on campus. We actually have a little smaller rate than most programs. Typical on campus is a little closer to about 30% of students will change their majors. So ours is a little less. And like I said, this last year we had about 130 students combined between our spring graduation and our summer graduation.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. Laura, kind of going back to housing, a little bit of dining also. Can you talk about the meal carts or just how will meals work? How will the cafeterias or the dining centers work? And how do we expect to do social distancing with that?
Yeah, so this is a question that always comes up on the town halls because for many of you, coming to eat at the dining hall is really important. Many of you know that CU Boulder is really, really highly ranked for its food quality. And it's actually an internal service. So our dining facility staff, they all work at CU Boulder. We're not contracting with another company. And the reason why that matters is because right now during COVID-19, we've been able to do a lot of really creative things with dining that I actually think we've wanted to do for a long time, but we've been given the green light to do so. So one of those things is that we've partnered on an app. There's going to be a way that folks can go online and look to see all of the dining menus for any of our dining facilities on campus at any point. So what's important about that is to know that with COVID-19, we're not sacrificing our dining and our food. So it's going to be as high quality as it always is. In fact, we're going to have even more options because we're opening more dining halls to create better social distancing for students. And so you'll be able to go online, you'll be able to see what's available anywhere across the university, so you can make some decisions of what you would like to do. And then I think of this somewhat similar to almost like the queue system they have at Disney, where you could be able to say that I want to come at this time and be able to work to say that this is my kind of lock in your own time of when you want to eat, which is really, really neat. The other thing I will say is that we're certainly moving to grab and go options whenever possible. And that's important because a lot of our dining facilities, the way that they're set up, what we know for COVID-19 is that inside spaces are a little bit more concerning for the way that COVID-19 spreads. So we're trying to open up space inside to sit wherever we can, but we're also increasing the spaces outside where students can sit. So there's going to be increased tents so that students can still have an experience where they're eating and it's a long table kind of experience. And what I'll say is that that's something that we know our students really they really like. Students eat outside as many days as possible when the school year is beautiful, which luckily for us in the fall is a lot of the days of the year. So that's supportive of making sure you still get a dining experience where you can sit with your friends, but you can do it smartly and with healthy decision making. The other thing I will say for the food, because we're opening increased dining facilities across campus, that will support with numbers. For Center for Community, which is really, really popular, that tends to get the majority of our students and our staff and faculty. One of the things that we're doing is we're limiting dining to only students. So our dining facilities, except for kind of those coffee options, Starbucks, things like that, they won't be open to faculty or staff. They're only open to our students that live on campus, initially at least. And that's to make sure that we're providing a healthier and safer experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Laura, going off of that, can you talk a little bit more about how do the dorms, how do the residence halls, or maybe campus, at what point do they decide to essentially send or close down all the classes or close down the college versus individually quarantine some of those students?
Yeah, so residence life and housing would not make that decision in a vacuum. Our leadership would be really closely connected in that, and actually we would be leaning into the Boulder Department County of Health to make that call. So it would not just be us, it would be all of our medical professionals that work at CU's campus, as well as the medical professionals in Boulder. And that's because we're looking at the percentage of people within Boulder and the impact to the Boulder community. And what I will say is that really the university isn't looking at residence halls closing in the way that we closed in the spring. So that was a pretty hard closure where we were asking students to leave and go home. And we just learned a lot about COVID, and we actually know that it's safer in many ways for students to stay on campus and shelter there than it is to send them into the community and maybe and spread that further, right? Contain the spread. I'm sure you've heard that within your own communities. So I would say that it's going to come from the county, it's going to come from the state, it's going to come from the nation to make that call in a larger way than just CU. We could go online for classes, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't continue to house our students. So I think that we can support both. And we have quite a big percentage of quarantine and self-isolation spaces in our res halls.
Excellent. So keeping an eye on time, I'll ask one last question to Laura, and then I'll jump it back to Paul and Dylan. so they can leave us with some last words before we close down for today. So Laura, can a student still move in to the residence hall on their designated arrival date, even if their COVID test hasn't come in yet?
I'm so glad you asked this question. There's just a lot of confusion about the COVID-19 test. And what I'll say is, I'm sure your experience has felt like this too as families and students. What we decide today changes the next day. And I don't mean just CU, I mean across the nation, because we're learning so much about COVID. So initially, everyone should have received, everyone that has a housing assignment received an email that talked about the testing that you need to have with you, testing that has been done within 5 days of your arrival to campus. When we made that decision as a university, it was a lot easier to get tests within local community. What we're finding is that that's become much more difficult. So for many of you, you may be running into a hurdle where your doctor won't give you a test unless you have symptoms, which we don't want you to lie. We don't want you to say that you have symptoms when you don't. So what we're doing to support that is that we're testing when students arrive as well. So the first thing that you'll do, you'll also see that everyone should have signed up for a move-in appointment. The move-in appointment is important because it allows for social distancing. We have a cap on the number of people that we have per day that are going to be on campus so that we know how many students are moving in and where they're moving into. And that's really important and helpful. The first thing you'll do in that move-in appointment is go to have the test and to show, if you do have a test already completed, to show that you're negative. We'll do that test on site. We're actually doing 2 different tests. We're doing the swab test, and then we're also doing the rapid test. The rapid test will come back in 45 minutes, which I've been working with folks all over the state, and that's the quickest that I've seen, actually. So it's going to come back around 45 minutes, and we'll be able to let you know the update on that test. If you are positive, we would not let you move into the residence halls. We would then quarantine you. Of course, you have an option to go to a hotel or something if you chose to, but we would quarantine you immediately for that 10 to 14 day window until you were safe to move into your residence hall room.
Excellent. Sounds like you have a great protocol in place with housing. So thank you so much, Laura. I'm gonna pass it back over to Dylan and Paul so they can leave us with the last few words.
Sure, thanks, Fernando. So again, thank you to everyone. We are really looking forward to having anyone. And I guess last couple of things I'll leave you with. Know that we are planning for whatever situation comes up in the fall. We've been planning for several months now. We had a large meeting with the whole program this morning to go over our protocols. And like I said, experience of your students might change week to week. We're going to start off very conservative. It's very likely they may have very little in person in the building the first couple of weeks. We're going to start off very conservative. We're going to take advantage of that outside. We want to keep everyone safe, and that's the number one thing. But they're going to have a great experience. All the faculty, all the staff have worked together to put together what I think is a really exemplary semester, the first experience. So be patient, be flexible. We're here, we're working with everyone, and we're going to make sure every student has a great experience.
Awesome, and I just want to echo and thank you to Paul and Laura and Peggy and Aaliyah and Fernando for all being here. I think it's conversations and dialogue when community comes together to really make sure that we can get you the information that you want. We've been compiling quite a few questions in the back end. I know some of you had your questions answered directly. Some of you, we've compiled a few thoughts together just to make sure we could get more questions through the system. Fernando and I will be piling through all of those questions and making sure that you got the answers to your questions. And if we need to do a follow-up with you, I do have that information from when you registered. So we will make sure that we get an outreach to you so that you have everything you feel that you need to set up this fall semester from your end as a parent. We know how important that piece is. So with that, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you for the conversations. Thank you, Laura, for joining us from outside of environmental design. And we look forward to welcoming your student here in a few weeks to CU Boulder and environmental design. So with that, have a wonderful rest of your evenings, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.